One of the biggest mistakes that parents make is not giving their children enough sleep. With hectic schedules, artificial lighting, the wake up call of electronic screens, caffeine, etc., it's very easy to fall into a routine of putting children to bed at our own bedtime hours of sleep, generally 8 hours, doctor recommended. So that's why it might be the easiest mistake for a parent to make instead of the biggest. But this could mean sharing the same adult 7 to 9 recommended hours of sleep as your children, and furthermore, losing that extra hour or two of alone time to desync from the day at hand. Most kids will wake up around 7 a.m. for school, which for grade school may mean as early as a 7 to 9 p.m. bedtime, according to doctor recommended time. For a significant amount of grade school, I ended up reverting my children's bedtime to 7 p.m. because their attitudes would change 180 degrees when there was obvious signs of tiredness. It'd be like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, depending on the sleep hours. But it wasn't just sleep, as it was also these extreme distractions or stimulants of artificial lighting, phones, Netflix that adds towards this difficulty of a sleep transition. Not withholding certainly energy drinks, caffeine, soda, any of those sugary beverages, most of which have caffeine. So what would a parent do wanting to save themselves a few moments of freedom, get their children to grow intellectually, and receive the bodily nutrients needed for growth while relaxing into the transition of nightfall? I gave them the choice on a no bedtime. Calling it reading time would have sounded like the threat of a nap, anyways. It's where I tell them that it is bedtime, and they are giving the futility of having to go to bed with the dimmed lights or with reading lights. However, they also will have the option to read for the next hour if they so desire. For whatever reason, I have received way more resistance and lollygagging in telling them it is either straight bedtime or a reading time when it's bedtime. So embrace this transition is what I would recommend. Part of its success is getting your child to slow down, accept that there is no substitute attention grabbers, and also at the same time read. And make sure that you confiscate the phone at night. I've had several kids and adults in the past tell me that they suffer insomnia and their television is running throughout the night and the phone is nestled under the pillow, ready to snap their attention away at any moment of a ding or a vibration. If reading was a song, it would be less than 100 beats per minute, like some sort of a slow classical song or a lullaby, whereas television, Twitter, Facebook, attacks and quick cuts at a much faster pace. In the way that people will get a text and immediately need to check their phone, even if they're in a good conversation. This advantage is that it acts like a timed sleep device, sort of a time. Yes, because depending on the child, they often pass out during this reading hour. So instead of it actually becoming, let's say, if they go to bed at 7 at their no bedtime, and they read till 8, then they usually end up passing out anyways after about half an hour. As the child grows older, I typically have become looser with no electronics times, like this. Even though paper homework doesn't slow the child's mind like reading will, it also became a no distraction, efficient way for them to finish homework without spending hours finishing one page because they simultaneously were checking Instagram, texting Johnny, eating, and finishing an episode of How I Met Your Mother simultaneously. Even in specialty cases like during the weekend, I would allow a movie in bed and on their computer during this quiet, no electronics time because it would often slow their minds down and help lull the onset of sleep. And on that note, I would also, for the movie, I would just have the computer like set to turn off at a certain time, like 9 p.m. or something, so that it would play the movie and then would just automatically turn off, assuming that they had already gone to sleep. And if they certainly didn't, then yes, that would be the bedtime. But the rest of the room would be dark, like a movie theater, while they were laying in bed, anyways. This type of reverse psychology, I guess is what I would call it, where you have to find a way to get inside, outside of the front door, as I mentioned in my last video, through trial and error and experiencing the frustrations of making errors that lead to creative solutions like these. Again, if I just gave them a straight bedtime, I would get tons of lollygagging, them getting ready for bedtime, brushing teeth, getting pajamas, perhaps getting clothes till the next day would take more than about 30 minutes to an hour because they would, have conversations on the side and get completely distracted. Um, so it was certainly it was a way from getting away from that, because certainly the last thing they wanted to do was just go straight to bed. And certainly with a reading time, you know, it wasn't like they were that thrilled with that option either. But again, just saying that, well, it is your bedtime, but if you want to read, you can. That for some reason was the reverse psychology that worked. And with roughly 6,939 bedtimes for a growing child under 18 full years of parenting, there is plenty of room to experience frustration between assisting kids mentally for sleep and dealing with the consequences when they are exhausted the next day. Regardless, while it may seem strict, it's an easy routine to employ and ultimately save them time and the efficiency towards focusing in on homework. It also helps them in concentrating towards reading and therefore increase interest and comprehension towards the subject matter. I've seen kids and adults under the presumption that they have zero free time strictly because they are so often distracted whilst attempting to accomplish tasks such as homework. A low energy, low distraction workspace is a must. So, by all means, this applies to adults too. If you're reading before bedtime, you're also preparing your mind to slow down and fall into sleep. In the case where a child has a younger sibling already in bed and their shared room, and or you would like them doing reading or homework in a separate sitting space, you can set aside a no electronics time just before bed as well. The rule is simple as it says: no computer, and you can add sort of a password on it to prevent late night use. Take away the phone, the iBoy, the gamepad, and what have you, and just tell them that they have no electronics and have them handed to you, any of the portable ones. Keeping the same mindset of a low energy, low distraction is important, and because a study, a personal library, or other quiet room is often rare, this setup is usually less successful because they are surrounded by other people, usually using their own electronic distraction toys. And so certainly music can also help in such a situation. Even at the end of a day, if in the living room can instill reflection and conversation between the parent and child that might have been missed because the mass quantity of distractions that are present today. So, on that note, you could certainly have the no bedtime where, it's just basically a reading time. And so, well, you can read for the next hour. You can definitely have it where it's, they can do homework in bed. And or you could have it with the lights off and play a movie in bed. That one to me is more of a reward, though, that I would give out. But also, I think it's just as important to have that no electronics time. And definitely as a parent, when the kids had a harder time in school, because they couldn't actually focus either in school or at home to do their homework, if their grades came out poorly, I would be much more incentivized to give this no electronics time. And basically, again, let's say that their bedtime is like 9 p.m. And then just say, well, you know what, 8 p.m. is your no electronics time. And so either at that moment they could, I guess, do their chores. And on that you have two, you could say, well, that's basically, they're just going to wait till no electronics time and then do it at the end of the day. And that might make them a little bit too tired. But on the other hand, you could also just say, well, you know what, you can't use electronics until you do your chores. I won't type in your password, you won't get your phone, etc., etc. But certainly I think that, especially when the grades were, problematic, that last hour, let's say like, again, 8 to 9 p.m., that I would just take all of the electronics away and they could focus on, their homework, or reading or whatever, because wasn't like, this is usually what I would do. Um, I think the reading time type of structure where it was no electronics or no bedtime basically. I know it sounds goofy, but that worked better with younger kids. Whereas I think with the older kids, the younger kid might already be in bed. They might not be able to use the room, but certainly I could take away the electronics, and they could, sit at a table, the dining table, etc., and focus on homework or conversation, or, spend like, 10 minutes with their parents perhaps and talk. But definitely, especially if the grades were bad, I think the no electronics time worked much better in that regard for the elder kids. Anyways, hopefully this helps someone. Um, hopefully I explained my point pretty well. I think it's a brilliant idea that needs to be implemented in more homes. And I mean, like I said, even I think adults, could take a lesson or two from the book, and read before bed to actually slow down. Make that, if you wake up at 7 and your bedtime's at 11, make the 10 p.m. time, the reading time, or something along those lines. I think it really helps transition into nightfall, especially with artificial lighting and caffeine and everything else that we love to drink. So, cheers. Thank you.